Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of Enforce technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by Enforce technology, only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnagrip.com.
IFSTA's Essentials of Firefighting 8th edition pairs trusted content with their latest research and includes a full suite of support products. Everything you've come to expect from IFSTA and more. It's essential content with unlimited customization potential. To learn more about this manual releasing in August of 2024, visit ifsta.org/essentials.
Hello and welcome to the Command Show with Chief Kastros and myself. We're excited to have you guys here today. We had a guest scheduled, but unfortunately he got pulled away for something else. So it's just going to be the two of us discussing the hottest topic in the fire service right now, and that might be the proposed changes to the OSHA 2 in 2 out standard. But before we get to that, Chief Kastros, anything you would like to lead off with? This is our first show post FDIC and the release of the book and some stuff that we might want to talk about.
It's we're blessed. That's the number one thing. God has been blessed, has blessed us, I should say, and our families. To be friends, to be together, to be in the fire service, to have our children and our wives. And this book has been wonderful. Thank you to everybody who's purchased the book, but more importantly, who is hopefully learning from it and going to enact what's in there. It's not a entree; it's a buffet. We say to people when we teach classes, it's not like fish or chicken. When you go to a wedding, you have to choose one or the other. It's not all or none. It's take what works for you. This book is supposed to be a resource to all fire departments across North America, and large, small, fully career, combination, volunteers, whatever you have, whether you're in a big city or out in the rural areas, there's something in here for you, I promise. So we worked hard at bringing that to you, and that's been a blessing, and we thank you for purchasing the book. And if you want some training, reach out to us at info@trainedfirefighters.com. And to Brian's point, probably the biggest topic right now that's near and dear to our hearts is this whole 2 in and 2 out latest potential change. And it's directly impacts potential rescue, which is what our whole command philosophy and curriculum is about. So with that, Brian, why don't you kind of kick us off with what's going on out there in the world?
Well, I'm excited to tackle this topic because I think it's important that we provide a little bit of balance to the conversation. There's a lot of hand wringing out there and screaming at the sky. And while it's understandable that people are upset about this, the truth of the matter is that this 2 in 2 out standard and OSHA's direction of it has been around for a while. There have been lots of organizations working very successfully within these parameters of a 2 in 2 out requirement for structure fires. And I think that that's what's so great about having you on the show, Chief, is that you can speak to that kind of 2 out requirement and how you've managed that in your instruction in your own agency, being in an OSHA state. I think a lot of us who have the most friction with it are in states that are not OSHA states as far as that goes. And we kind of tend to think, how dare someone tell us how to do these things? And honestly, that the OSHA standard could change and it may still not apply to you. So we'll talk about some balance on that. But before we go down that path, in the book, I'm looking at it right now, we do talk a lot about how the fireground has gotten safer for firefighters and how the fireground has gotten more dangerous for civilians. And we speak to this point a lot throughout the textbook, not necessarily to the 2 in, 2 out, but just kind of that divergence between firefighter safety and civilian safety, and how we're struggling with that a little bit. But we had a really good conversation just a few weeks back. And I think it's important to kind of set that up. And I think that's the direction that some of these people are trying to take the conversation. So before we work into kind of 2 out compliance, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about how that discussion we had over the difference between law enforcement and in firefighting, and how we're approaching this threat. And my biggest problem with kind of the OSHA view and the legal view of the fire as a hazard is that it's static. And I think that that's kind of a problem, because lack of intervention means that the hazard is going to grow. And early interventions means we could be neutralizing it or make progress on it. Where we have this very black and white view of a fire, those initial arriving resources are going to make a difference one way or the other. Either their lack of intervention is going to lead to a greater problem, or their early actions are going to start to reduce that hazard threat or neutralize it. And I see this kind of static approach to the hazard in legalese being maybe something that's hurt law enforcement, and they're really taking a complete opposite direction to it. They're seeing, those active shooter events as a initial threat that must be rapidly addressed, and that initial response to be leveraged to reduce that hazard as much as possible. And I know you do a lot of unified command discussion. You talk specifically and have an entire team dedicated to this topic. And I just kind of want to, we obviously are familiar with the trend in the fire service in one direction or the other. I'd like you to talk about how you've been managing and monitoring the law enforcement response to this, as far as really working on neutralizing it almost at the expense of command in that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're referring to Uvalde, right?
Yes,
The
correct.
fire that happened there. So that was a game changer. And if you look at the fire service and you contrast that with law enforcement, obviously the fire service has been attempting to integrate incident command to everything for decades, culminating in the incident command system. And despite that, we have a lot of variety on what's out there in the world as far as the fire service goes. Contrast to that, law enforcement really hasn't dealt with incident command. They don't really study it. They don't train on to it as much, nearly as close or as much as the fire service does. Not even close. So it's rare to find a police department that really trains on incident command, let alone the incident command system. And they have always wanted to go in and get the bad guys, and that's what they're supposed to do. And Uvalde was an example of what happens when they don't, and that really became a sentinel event in the law enforcement industry and law enforcement world, I should say. No different than we would call Charleston a sentinel event, or Boyd Street, certainly 9/11. Yeah, Brett Tarver, Southwest Supermarket in Phoenix. These are all sentinel events that tend to change our profession and our operations. So they were already reluctant to go in, or to I should say to set up a command system, even multiple layers deep, whether it was the first arriving officers or a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, even chiefs. They were reluctant to discuss it, train about it, train on it, attend training. When we do unified command training throughout the United States, we do it all over the country. It's grant funded, so it's free to all the fire departments and police departments around the country when we do it. Typically, out of a 50-person class, you might have 5 or 10 law enforcement, and the rest are fire, EMS, or other county or public works type folks. So, or people that might be in the EOC. So when Uvalde happened, it kind of gave them the green light of, hey, look, we were right all along. Let's not deal with the incident command. Let's just get in there and get the bad guy. And as we all know, there's a lot of problems with that. So there's a balance between getting after the task level work, in this case, neutralizing the threat, of a shooter, for example, just like we would balance going in and putting the fire out or going in for a rescue. It's kind of the same thing. Let's just focus on the human element for a second, so we can compare apples to apples as much as possible with law enforcement. So it's either go in and neutralize the bad guy, the threat, or for us go in and get the victim. And with us, we have a report of a victim or a high likelihood or a high probability of a victim, so high victim profile or confirmed. They're told there's an active shooter, or they hear gunfire, so they go towards the gunfire just like we go towards the fire or the victims. So it's very similar. Where I think two out is concerned, and this big debate that we're seeing is it's another attempt to double down on what we've been doing for the past 20 years or so with two out. And if you look at the Code of Federal Regulations, it's 1910.134. I think it's paragraph G, talks about two out, and it's the discussion is now four out, and that again that's obviously leans towards the safety of the firefighters. However, at what expense? Just like law enforcement says, look, we're not going to stand out in front, set up command, and stay at the curb, and in their minds, hold back from going in and neutralizing the threat. The fire service doesn't want to sit out front and wait for two out or four out or 12 out or whoever knows how many out. We want to go in and get the victim. So that's what we sign up for. That's what we train to. That's what's in our hearts and our souls. That's what we do. And anybody that tries to meddle with that, despite their best intentions, or delay that, or regulate that, or force us to do something that we know could hinder our mission, is not going to go well for us or the law enforcement industry. It's just not going to go well. So imagine there's a fire and a fire department pulls up to a fire in anywhere USA, and there's a family of 5, and they're trapped in this house, and there's footage of the fire department standing outside saying we need to wait for 2 out or 4 out or whatever. Meanwhile, you hear screams, or you hear people, or maybe you don't even hear them, but you at least know they're in there. There's a validation. It's a confirmed victim profile. And that's going to make headlines probably, right? It's going to make headlines. Now, they often don't. We don't make headlines. We only make headlines as firefighters when it's 9/11, unfortunately. The rest of the time, Boyd Street, for example, Southwest Supermarket, Charleston, and any host of other events where we've died or had serious injuries don't make headlines. But guess what does? Uvalde. That makes headlines. What's going to make headlines? The incident in Las Vegas at the active shooter event that happened there. So it's just a weird time. So, like as usual, I mean, look at the fire department versus law enforcement. How many cop shows and movies are there? A zillion of them. How many firefighter movies and TV shows are there? Very few.
And they're all bad.
So,
they're all very bad.
They're terrible. They're terrible. And so the point is that here we are yet again, where we find ourselves in a situation where we have to fight for our right not to party, not to partay. You guys knew that's where I was going with that. Beastie Boys. But for our right to do our job, despite the best intentions of OSHA or anybody else. And so what I'm proud of is the fact that the fire service is pushing back this time. The first time we had 2 out come out, and I'm not saying 2 out's bad, so please don't take it that way. Anybody listening from OSHA or anybody else, we're not saying 2 out's wrong or bad. It's a very important tool. It helps keep us safe, and that's all good. We'll get into that. But when oftentimes there's an overkill, and I can tell you, we'll get into this. The interpretation of 2 out in the American Fire Service is insane. This before 4 out or whatever else happens, 2 out is crazy. We've taught hundreds and hundreds of fire departments around the United States. We've been blessed and fortunate to do so. And we learned every time we go, we learned a lot from these great organizations and what they do, what works, what doesn't work, what their staffing levels are, their response levels, and what they do for tactic strategy, including 2 out. And I can tell you right now, there's some departments that have never heard of 2 out. They don't do 2 out. They don't talk about 2 out. Other departments' first line is 2 out. Some states, parts of the country are highly regulated, and they're very, very, they err towards safety and liability and litigation and all this stuff. And they practically regulate themselves out of doing their job. Others, whatever, they don't even think about it. They don't even talk about it. It's not even on vernacular. So I look forward to talking with you and everybody else about that as we go on to this conversation.
Well, I think in one of the really good areas that you articulate this well is when you discuss the opportunity cost, and I think that's something that's extremely important to us, and it may not be spoken in those terms, but every action has an opportunity cost to it, and the opportunity cost is even higher when there's fewer people to execute the job. So first in officer has to make that decision. Am I going for the rescue or am I going for fire attack? Or do I split up my resources and have one person flow a line while this happens? And I believe that that's probably the greatest friction here, is that someone else is determining the costs of our opportunity. If we choose, fire attack, well, then the cost is even greater now because we're giving up those next resources to support fire attack, and we are leaning towards redundancy over intervention. And we talk a lot about that in our work and in the book about how those sequential operations of fire attack and then backup and then water supply have the opportunity cost of rescue or search now falling to a third due. So as you said, there's a lot of examples of how this is rolling out around the country. It's highlighted right now because now someone else is trying to tell us to do that. But there's a lot of departments that aren't 2 out states that have internally created this type of procedure and process and has not given ample thought to the opportunity costs of these operations. So I like that we're having this conversation today because obviously OSHA has kicked off the issues with this. But there is a lot of places that are operating in this manner and not taking a step back to consider the recommendations from UL that fire attack and search should be conducted simultaneously, regardless of there is a lot of data and information and best practices and recommendations pushing us in the other direction of intervening early, neutralizing the threat, removing the hazard, or isolating them from it as soon as possible versus this other path. So I think we may be concerned about OSHA, but there's just a lot of local agencies that need to reassess how they're following procedure as well.
Yeah, it comes down to the local agency. I mean, it comes down to how it manifests itself. Well, it could be 2,000 out. I don't care how many numbers it is. It comes down to what the local agencies do. It's your policy and procedure. What I want to talk about, something you just hit on, is we can no longer, and this is just a fact we talk about in the book and our training, you cannot have a linear mindset anymore. You have to have an exponential mindset where things are happening at the same time. Fire attack, rescue, vent, medical are all happening simultaneously, rapidly deployed, rapidly supervised and coordinated, and supported.
Can we stop right there, Chief? Because before we get too down this, and I just did a program for a group yesterday, and while you rattled off fire attack, vent, medical, and rescue, people wrap their brains around those being tactics or those being tasks. Can you please, right now, while you're fresh and clear of mind with your
before I get too drunk,
yes, to talk about those as objectives, not those as tactics or tasks.
So when we talk about 3 levels on the fireground or any emergency scene, right? Strategic, tactical, task. Fire attack, vent, medical, and rescue are tactics. They're tactical objectives. To accomplish those, you have to perform tasks. Those are the tasks. For example, fire attack would be deploying a 1 3/4 line, supplying that line, stretching it, making a door. Those are the tasks of the objective or the tactical objective of fire attack. If we're going to perform rescue, that's an objective, that's a tactical objective, and we're going to perform tactics like VES, VEIS. They're comprised of tasks: vent, enter, isolate, search. Those are 4 different tasks. If you're going to perform ventilation, that's an overall tactical objective. How do you do it? The tactic of vertical vent, for example, is comprised of multiple tasks: laddering, sounding, cutting, louvering, punching, for example. So what happens is the nomenclature gets muddy. We think strategic, tactical, and task get muddy. Is it so? For example, the big question we ask in classes is transitional attack a strategy or a tactic? It's a tactic. Okay, it's a tactic of fire attack under the strategy of an offensive strategy. Okay, it's not a strategy itself, it's a tactic. What tasks are there? You stretch the line, you go and you hopefully use a smooth bore or a straight tip, and your short bursts in the overhead. Um, and those are the tasks. So hopefully that answers the question you had out that you wanted to kind of get out there. I hope
Well,
that
yeah, I
helps.
mean, you went down the fire attack objective, but really, I mean the rescue as the objective, you know, and I think that's
Well,
something
rescue
that,
is an objective.
yeah,
It's a
search is
tactical objective.
yep, search is the task, removal is a task, triage, treatment,
Yeah,
transport is a task,
yeah.
but
But rescue,
yes,
the rescue is a tactical objective comprised of multiple tasks.
yep,
So anytime you have a bunch of tasks clumped together, they become a tactic. Okay, an objective and a tactic are at the same level. A task is just that. It's a component of an objective. It's a component of a tactic. So when it comes to rescue, you could do VES as a tactic. You could do what we introduce as pincer search, for which is multiple locations. You could do a drop, turn a window into a door. You could do a primary from the front door, like we always do. A window initiated search. Those are all different tactics, comprised of different tasks. So going back to the big picture, every incident commander in the universe should be thinking about cost versus gain, right? And what do we have? What's their cost? Is our firefighters. That's the biggest, most important, vital resource that we have, is the precious souls of our firefighters and their families. So when we go to a fire, you know what you have. You know what you get on a house fire. You know what you get on a commercial fire, an apartment fire, what have you. So you know what the cost is going in. What you don't know is the benefit or the rate of return. What's the victim profile? Within all that, that's where you drop your 2 out in, because your 2 out is on a scale, just like your risk is on a scale. The more you have to gain, the more risk you're going to take. Simple as that. But what people want, and this is a derivative of leadership. See, this is why leadership is a common denominator to everything we do. Leadership is everything from command presence to personalities, to initiative, to training and confidence and competence and ability to communicate. Those are all derivatives of the fireground. And what I love is that we're starting to actually get into that discussion. Some people a lot smarter than me are talking about that. And so when we look at 2 out, there's a leadership element, there's a human element that says, well, we got to check the box and we got to do it just the way it says, and we got to follow the letter of the law or we don't get in trouble. And that's a personality type. Then there's those who say, screw that, I'm not even going to deal with it. That's another personality type. Typically, they're doing this, and they don't do it just on 2 out. They do it day in and day out in the fire department, whether it's specking a rig or, whatever the hell it is. It's just a derivative of their personalities. So organizations take on the personality of their leadership, functional or dysfunctional as it may be. A personality of a leadership team or fire chief or whomever is what the organization does. So when you look at 2 out, it's a derivative of that leadership. It's a derivative. So if they adopt it or don't adopt it, how they adopt it, if they train to it, if they talk about it, their whole approach is a derivative of the leadership of that. And then you further take that, and then that's just policy level. Then you actually have to train to it and then actually execute on the fireground, which are whole other levels of human dynamics. So right now, the fire service is going through a very cerebral, emotional process, primarily emotional process, which I get, and I'm part of it, which is, this is bullshit. What are we doing? Oh my God, we're going to kill people. Totally get it. I'm just glad I'm not out there anymore actually running fires, physically working like you are as you're in your uniform and your beautiful white shirt right there. Because I'd probably be twitching so hard, I'd have another stroke, or my head would flip off my body or something, because I'd be so pissed off, because God knows how this would manifest itself. So at the end of the day, as they say, the bottom line is, look, we exist to save lives. And then after that, hopefully save some property. And the past 20 years, we've been obsessed with our own safety, which is a wonderful thing. We should always be obsessed. But it started to become to the detriment of our mission and to saving human lives, civilian lives. And we've been making a lot of progress the past few years with the advent of things like Firefighter Rescue Survey, the UL NIST studies, looking and studying from a scientific, data-driven standpoint, as well as empirical, as well as experience. We're getting back to the victim, and it's been wonderful. And you're seeing that wave. I call it the Renaissance of rescue. We're in the Renaissance of rescue right now. And the North American Fire Service, I think the whole world is really going, hey, we need to get back to the victim. And that's what we do. We're you're doing this job long enough, you see patterns. The pendulum swings back and forth. And there was such a necessary emphasis on fire attack and fire behavior because we were so behind that fire attack and water on the fire and transitional attack were really a priority, along with 2-out, RIC, and all those things. But now we're getting back to the victim because, like, okay, we got the safety thing down. Let's not overreact anymore. Let's get back to the victim. Well, then all of a sudden, just when we're starting to make progress, this thing called 4-out comes up. It's like, what the hell? So I'm proud of the fire service for speaking up, for being engaged, for looking at the information, the data, their experience, and standing up for their right to do their job. However, let's be smart about how we respond to this. Let's not be overly emotional. Take it from a guy who's so passionate that, it gets the best of me. As I get older and get more of this salt and less pepper, I realize that, walking down the mountain versus running down the mountain, you're going to accomplish the mission. So I've talked too much. Go ahead. I'm going to take a break.
I think you're
gin and tonic.
I think you're right. And that's one thing I absolutely applaud, the angle that has just occurred with Chief Thompson and Nick and Duffy and the group that has come together to present a very well written, well constructed document to OSHA on this topic. And they released it at the right time. They provided the access to the public comment for our peers. So that way they're speaking from the same sheet of music and they're voicing their concerns on the matter, but they're also providing information to OSHA. Let's not forget that OSHA isn't a fire service agency. They are a federal level oversight on a lot of different hazards. And I think that it's okay to say, hey, maybe these guys just aren't aware of, like you said, the progress that we've made. Maybe they are not aware of all the data and trends and direction that is leading us towards improving outcomes for civilians. Maybe their perspective is still this, confined space access by public servants where there is not a there is not a victim in play, or as we talked about the OSHA 2 and 2-out, it treats the hazard as static, meaning the entire area is a threat and the threat does not change. Whereas we know, from the UL information about closed doors, there is very likely survivable spaces with high, levels of oxygen that are completely protected and not a IDLH within a building that's involved. So hopefully, this approach and this information transition back up the chain is taken into account. That's the whole point of public comment periods. We deal with them in NFPA. We believe that we have a great grasp on a topic, and then it's presented from another angle in that area that we're not informed on, and we have to weigh that out. So I think it's healthy. I think again, like we are approaching this in the right style, in the right period, given that opportunity. But ultimately, as we talked about, this is a federal decision. This is a mandate that will go down, no different than any other federal decision. And we have weathered things like this before. We always show up and do work. I don't see any firefighters that after this comes out going to throw their badge on the table and escape to Canada or something like that. We're going to continue to do our job. We will navigate this. And as you said, there are plenty of great firefighters that are working within restrictions similar to this all across the country, and they are still getting the job done very effectively. So,
absolutely. So, you talked about the history. Let me tell us our brothers and sisters out there what it was like when 2-Out did come and how my organization processed it. So 2-Out, you look at the regulation. There's nothing in there that says rapid intervention crew or RIC. There's not. It's not in there. We created that. Just like you can't have a raft, you have to have an IRB. We love 3-letter. We can't have a jet ski. It's a PWC, right? We have to make something everything technical. There's people out there doing this every day, but when it's us, it gets regulated and we have to put special names.
Regulated and abbreviated.
Yep, exactly. And acronyms. So the way my organization adopted it was like, look, initially, and not saying this is right or wrong, just to give you a history, 2-Out was separate from RIC. There was 2-Out was the minimum, and some call it IRIC, Initial Rapid Intervention Crew or Rapid Intervention Team. Some called it backup. We called it a 2-Out line, and that was just try to be as plain in English as we could. And that wasn't RIC. That was just initial to support. That could become a secondary attack line. I don't like to call it a backup because people think backup is 2-Out, whatever. I like to call it a secondary attack line. So if you go in past the threshold, that 2-Out line becomes a secondary attack line, whatever you call it. That means you have 2 lines actively fighting fire in the structure. So then we would put a third line down, being a 2-Out for those 2 active attack lines. Separate from that, when resources came on scene and the situation dictated not a rescue, but a fire without known victims, then RIC would be established also. And so that was kind of the SOGs. Well, that's like most things, we overreact. When we learn something new, we kind of tend to overdo it, over safety it, whatever. Then we kind of, this pendulum swings back. And that's, the fire service does that, humans do that. And so then it became, well, the 4th company was, the 4th engine was going to be RIC. Well, now it's discretion of the incident commander. So at the minimum, there's 2-Out. But when do you apply 2-Out is the question. Before you even get into 4-Out. Because, like I said, there's a lot of disparity out there in the fire service right now with 2-Out. So what we teach in our classes in our book is, look, it's a scale. And to Brian's point earlier, nothing's free on the fireground. There's a cost benefit to everything we do. If we're doing this, we're not doing that. So if we choose to attack the fire and we only have one crew on scene, then we're not affecting rescue. Now you could say, well, attacking the fire makes it more tenable. Of course it does, but you're still not pulling them out of the building. So rescue is not happening. Are you improving conditions? Yes, hopefully. But then you say, okay, then I'm going to take a second company and put them as 2-Out before I affect rescue. Well, that's where the victim profile comes in. And we always talk about this. Every incident starts with the victim profile. Do we have victims? Are they human? If so, where are they? How many? What's their status as best we can? That's where we get into the signal and the 4 types, low, moderate, high, confirmed. And what we teach is that the threshold for 2-Out is between moderate and high. If you have a home, middle of the day, and you have a credible source tells you on scene that no one's inside or everyone's out, and they're sane, sober, and they live there, like, how do you know? I live here. Then we're still going to search. We're still going to do a primary, but it's a low victim profile, meaning that we're going to take that. That's our gain, basically low rate of return. Okay, which means what? Low risk. Well, if it's room and contents, if it's a kitchen fire, if it's an attic fire, if it's an attached garage, we're going to go in and we're going to do what we do and search, put the fire out, and do our thing. But if it's a low victim profile and it's True Value hardware store and it's blowing black smoke and fire out every orifice, and the guy says, I'm the manager, and when I got here, I came here, I've been here for about half an hour, and something started burning or whatever in the back, and now it's going crazy, and I'm the only one here. That's also a low victim profile, but the risk is too much. We may not go into that. Moderate is you pull up to a house and no one's around, middle of the day. Now, you could easily argue that post-COVID, there's more people at home, working from home. You could argue that there's more people, more families cohabitating. Sure. But from the outside, there's no signs of life, and no one's telling you anything. There's no one's around. It's just a passerby. That would be a moderate victim profile. So in those situations, 2 out may be warranted because we're erring on the side of the risk factor, and the gain is low. The risk is therefore low. And so we're going to put measures in like 2 out, for example. Then we have a high victim profile, and that's going to be an apartment building any time of day, multifamily any time of day, a house at night with a car in the driveway. Not a confirmed victim. No one's telling you there's victims, but it's a high likelihood because of the aforementioned issues, plus the fact of the time of day or the occupancy type. Those are high. Okay, so that I'm probably going to delay 2 out maybe a little bit because I want to get in there because I'm erring on the side of the rescue and the victims. And then confirmed is obviously, hey, a credible source tells you there's people trapped inside. You see them, you hear them, or someone who's credible tells you, ask them, how do you know? I live here. My kids are inside. I know they're inside. You get your signal. And then 2 out is obviously out the window. And so is Rick probably, unless enough resources are on scene. The point of all this is that it's a sliding scale. We have to make potentially life and death decisions in this job as officers with limited information in a compressed time frame. That's what this is about. And going back to the leadership element, there are humans in our job that are chiefs and company officers that don't operate well in that situation. God bless them. We love them, but they're very regimented. They're very planned. They're very specific and strict, and they follow rules, and they don't deal with a lot of inputs and a lot of unknowns. And so they tend to what? Freeze and not act. And so it's analysis paralysis.
Or they prefer to turf the responsibility to a mandate.
Exactly. Oh, I'm just erring on the side of safety. No, you're not. You're not. You're erring on a mandate that you think will save you from litigation. That's the reality of it. Instead of erring on the side of life, that's what we should be talking about. I'm erring on the side of safety. Life. Whether it's civilian life or firefighter life, life is life. And just like I'm not going to let firefighters go into a building that's coming down on them, that's known to be vacant. I'm not gonna also hold them back from a fire that has victims inside that they can go in and effect a rescue. Because life is life, whether it's a civilian life or a firefighter's life. And that's the balance, and that's the burden of command. And so when regulations get inserted into that, no matter how stringent they may be, I've never commanded a fire or made a decision based on whether or not I'm going to get in trouble. That's never driven a decision. I've made the decision based on life, my crews, and the civilians that we're sworn to protect. That's it.
And I think that's you using that example of the cost. I mean, that's the simplest answer. We cannot afford those 2 people to pull a backup line when we do not know if this occupancy is occupied or not. That is that viewing it through that lens of what is the cost of those 2 people to make one operation redundant. Well, a lot of times the cost of 2 people making one operation redundant is the lack of initiation of another incident priority. And that's kind of, what we've been talking about a lot is fire attack, vent, medical. Once we get those all initiated, then we will start to revise, reinforce, or anything like that. Whereas if those 4 are not initiated or working down the line, then it's, we are costing those objectives. With that said, the defensive fire, yes, we are going to continue to reinforce fire attack because that is really the only objective here. But in those situations that you gave, the single family residents with kind of the unknown situation, we have to initiate as many fireground objectives as we can before we start to reinforce and make them redundant.
Let's look at some data to your point that you're talking about right now, which you said so well. What is the percentage? Because I know you know this better than I do off the top of your head. What's the percentage of fires where we know we know victims are there before we go in? What's that percent? What's that data point?
Hold on one second. I think
I want to say it's 25%
of the reported victims trapped with them.
I can't remember. Knowing, obviously, we have to. we're going to have a greater chance of rescuing somebody if we know there's a victim, if we know ahead of time that they're in there, right? That's the general
I think
data point.
I think
But I think there's a percentage of how many times we will know that the victims are
you
present.
talking? So I think I'll have to track it down, but the one we use in our class is that when we receive reports of victims trapped, 80% of the time they're reliable.
Right. So there's that. 80% of the time they're reliable. Okay. So and so here's the thing, is that that's typically an unsolicited piece of information. We get told on dispatch. Somebody runs up to the first in company officer or to the chief screaming, "My babies are trapped." Okay. Or somebody's inside. How many more victims could we harvest and confirmed victim situations could we harvest if we actually taught our people to ask for that information while they're stretching a line, while they're doing a 360, while they're pulling up on scene, while they're getting off the rig, looking for and asking bystanders for that information.
Or when they're dispatched, asking dispatch, do you have any reports of parties trapped?
Even better. Even better. That's what I started getting in the habit of that when I was responding to a fire en route. If dispatch didn't say what the victim profile was, I'd ask. Dispatch, Battalion 7, do I have a report of everyone out or not? Stand by. And almost every time, stand by, meaning what? They didn't ask.
Yeah.
And so why are they not asking? And so that's a training issue with your dispatch center. They're the initial victim profilers, right there. And so en route is the best time to find out. If you can't do it then, or you're not sure, they're not sure, or they can't get the call back, or they didn't ask, then get on scene and find out. Because firefighters are very task oriented, heads down, working, adrenaline, they're going to have that tunnel vision. They're going to want to get after the fire as soon as possible, which is great. However, they often miss heads up tactical opportunities, like a victim profile, like asking a bystander if everyone's out or not. And not just if they're in there or not, but where are they? How many of them? What's their age and their medical disposition, if any? It takes 10 seconds to get that victim profile. And so that right there can really help with the whole 2 out, 4 out, 12 out issue. Because if you can articulate, I did a victim profile, I checked with bystanders, and you got the signal, right? Which is species, incapacity, gender, number, age, location. 10 seconds. Or you articulate, nobody was around, but it was 2 a.m. and it was a multifamily apartment building. That's at least a high victim profile. Those are the types of things that, to me, are going to be able to articulate. And that kind of helps everybody. It helps the bean counter type of critical thinker who wants more information, because now you've justified it. But it also helps that firefighter that just goes on instinct and wants to get in and get after it, that just instinctively knows that this apartment building is occupied. Okay, can you articulate that if someone asks you? And again, it's not about staying out of trouble. If it was about staying out of trouble, don't go into burning buildings. If you're so risk averse, the litigation is the least of your problems. How about don't go into burning buildings? Let's not die. How about that? So let's get over ourselves here. Okay. But to your point, we have some really smart people that are looking at this critically and are giving some good data. So that's what it's about. And the training is going to continue.
I have that information that you pulled that you were asking for, Chief. So of the 3,000 rescues, so this is a 3,000 rescue data set. 67% of the rescues had reports of victims.
So the vast majority, 2/3 of the time, there's a victim.
Correct. 29% of the time, 29% of the 3,000 rescues, there was no report. So that doesn't mean that they said no one was in there. That, like you said, that's nobody a moderate victim. That you show up to a single family in the middle of the day, you have no information. That accounts for 30% of the rescues, basically. And
maybe part of those 30% though, did they ask?
That's what we will never know. I mean, like we can only ask so many questions.
That might be another data point to find out.
Then finally, 3% of the 3,000.
Yeah.
There was reports that everyone was out, and this is probably one of the most interesting ones because again, this is another timing one. At dispatch, yes, there was reports of everyone out. We see it time and time again that people go back in. At the time of this, the homeowners in the street on the phone with dispatch. Yes, everyone's out. Between, you coming out of the station, they want to go back in for their dog. They want to go back in and try to close the door, and the conditions are different. There was a recent incident where a family was out front, had said everyone was out. The firefighters located a victim inside. It was the neighbor. The neighbor had run in trying to get the family out because when he came out, he saw the house was on fire. It was a innocent bystander, a good Samaritan killed in a neighbor's house fire. So they still happen, that those things still happen, but to your sliding scale, that's where it is, so I think that those are kind of important numbers. And then,
They're critical numbers.
back to the other layers of this, fires that have rescues on average have more than one victim, 1.6 for single family, 2.6 for the apartment. So that's why, like you're saying, an apartment fire in general, anytime should have a high suspect rescue profile, because even if there is one, it could very well quickly become an MCI. And I think that those are, again, the things that an OSHA is hurting us on, because it's not even occupancy dependent. Whereas
exactly.
an NFPA 1710 is guiding us in a different direction. NFPA 1710 is saying for apartment fires, you need to have multiple search teams. It is saying for high-rise incidents, you need to have multiple search teams. You need to have, so like, once again, the conflict of a 4-out, the opportunity cost is hindering us from meeting our NFPA 1710, which is subject matter experts determining what our priorities should be. So it's very difficult managing all these things and the conflicts that they create. The bottom line is we need to be bold and confident and say, I understand the guidance on this, but we answer to our citizens, our civilians, and our mission, and we have to put that in this framework as well.
100%. 100%. And those are some great points that you brought up. And I'm just thinking of a couple of fires off the top of my head that I had where people went back in. I had a fourplex one time with a report of a victim. Or actually, I don't even know if there was reports of victims. But then I got there and somebody went inside, never came out. Other bystanders started throwing rocks in the windows to ventilate it, thinking they were helping, of course. Then it blew the fire up. And then, of course, the Morse Avenue incident, which was the spark that ignited the Calm to Chaos endeavor, was same thing. Initially, one child trapped, then 2 children trapped. Their dad literally went in route. Dad went back in to get them out, and he got trapped, and all 3 died. So this is not a black and white world we live in. It's very gray, but there's black and white people in the world that we live in. Black and white thinkers. They think in terms of black and white. And that doesn't fit this world that we live in. It doesn't fit very well. And what happens is you'll have a policy or SOG will be revised or what have you that says because of the new mandate or OSHA, whatever, 4-out, and then there'll be no training. There'll be no training. It'll just be a policy. And we check the box. Again, somebody at headquarters checked the box. But there was no training in the field by the battalion chiefs with their captains and lieutenants and their crews, and not just training, talking about it, but actually executing it on the drill ground with smoke conditions, with varied victim profiles, so you can apply it in the field. So again, I never commanded a fire worrying about getting in trouble, or my only concern was life, and that of my firefighters and that of the people we're sworn to protect. Everything else was secondary. And this would never, if I was still out there, this wouldn't change that.
Yeah.
This wouldn't change that. It just doesn't. And so it comes down to the incident commander and the officers on scene and the execution of the decisions they make. And that is a derivative of the training they have, and which is what? A derivative of the leadership they provide. So none of that changes. None of that changes. So.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's an interesting time. Again, I think the best part of it right now is we have information to lean on. And I think,
yes.
I think that makes us more confident in our argument. And I would hope that makes us more confident in, if this does go down, if this becomes a mandate and we should, vary from it in our performance. I mean, I don't think we could be more confident right now in that it was the right decision to make. I understand the the setting. And it's so crazy because when you think about it, I know that you are very old, but you don't look it. And for you to say that you were around with the initial, take of 2 in 2 out, while it wasn't that long ago, information access wise, it was a very long time ago.
Long time ago.
This is a time, we talked about that in a recent podcast I did, and in our book, it's evaluation of interior conditions on a very high level, as far as temperatures at different levels in the occupancy, temperatures and gas levels. The evaluation of the interior of a structure has only been quantified in probably the last 10 years. So anything that predates that did not have access to that. Today, we can say a working fire in a structure is not a common threat throughout. Lower in the atmosphere is safer. Behind closed doors is safer. So a vault, full of hydrogen cyanide gas or hydrogen sulfide, whatever it may be, in a confined space access, yes, that entire area is immediately detrimental to life and health. But a residential occupancy is not consistent in its threat. A residential occupancy is a high life hazard. For all these reasons, we will assume a more aggressive posture when it comes to the life hazard associated with it. So I know, even in the face of this, whether it's preemptively or post publication of it, we will have a well supported argument towards our operational posture.
Right. Well said. God, isn't he smart? He's so smart. Let's kind of start closing with this, maybe. One of the things in the book that we introduced to the fire service is, when you ask about what are the 3 incident priorities, people always say life, safety, incident stabilization, property, environment. When we changed it, life saving.
Yep.
And that was a critical change, because whenever you say life safety to firefighters, they're like, well, that's almost a contradiction. Like, life, civilian, safety, us. So what are we doing? But it's intended to be life saving. If the priority is to save life on this incident, because we know there's life to be saved, or we have a high suspicion of it, then that's the thing. And in that instance, safety actually, gets bumped down the priority list, because we're going to put ourselves in harm's way intentionally because of that higher risk, believing there's a high reward. So resource allocation, risk, speed, all those things are going to be different than if it was a defensive fire and the incident stabilization priority was in effect, or light or environment, and that kind of stuff. So it's people. It's funny because firefighters tend to think, and we talk about this in the book, from the bottom up: task, then tactical, then strategic. Meaning, Mongo's going to break something, then Mongo is going to think about if he broke the right thing, and then he's going to wonder if breaking things was even the right thing to do. Strategic is the last thing on his mind. The incident commander needs to think strategic, which is, what's our priority, what's our strategy, what are our objectives, deploy resources and support those resources, and in a rapid fashion. Meeting the Mongos of the world and bringing them to getting them on the same page, all while communicating and having the same sense of reality of what the heck's going on the fireground. So this is going to continue to be a good conversation. I look forward to more conversations, more formal ones. Maybe there'll be a big, FDIC. We'll talk about this in July at the meeting, but there'll be a big FDIC forum, or we'll talk about it. I don't know, but so yeah.
Well, it's been a good day. I mean, we kind of jumped on this topic quickly. It's a hot take on it, if you will. We did not put a whole lot of preparation into it, but it's still within there. I mean, I think that we are surrounded by counterpoints to a static view of a fire threat. So stay tuned. Keep engaged, keep productive in your engagement. Let's not create tribal atmospheres on this, but let's be be revolutionaries in a proper manner. Public comment is out. Please access it and publicly comment, so that way those thoughts and opinions can be taken into account. I believe, Chief, we will be resuming our next command show with another contributing author from our book. So we look forward to continuing that conversation through the text. And, also access us, let us know on things that went well at FDIC that you would like to see more of at FDIC. Heard some amazing feedback the other day, as both of us will be headed to the FDIC Advisory Board meeting in July. And it is important that we hear from our constituents as representatives of a very passionate fire service.
Amen. Perfectly said. Perfectly said. You hit on one thing I want to reiterate, which is the let's not become polarized on this issue like we do on every other freaking issue in the fire service. There's going to be people that right now are on board with what we're saying. It's like totally 100%. Yeah. And even more so like, oh, victim. And that's great. But there's going to also be people who are like, oh my God, finally we have 4 out. We should have 12 out. And there's going to be, they're out there. There's folks who are out there and they're going to feel justified and they're going to call it safety and they're going to call it, risk management, whatever they call it. And it's going to start doing this. It's going to be interesting to see how that comes out. So training wise, please reach out to us at info@trainfirefighters.com. We're doing Calm the Chaos, Train the Trainer all over the country, and leadership classes and unified command classes like Brian mentioned. And visit our website. We're also doing the assessment center promotional officer development classes around the country, again, in person and online. The Calm the Chaos is not only online, but it's in person, and it's Train the Trainer, physical, actual hands-on training. It's fun. We're having a blast doing it. We help you get your teams up and running. And also the book, we're very thankful that it's out. We're thankful for all the incredible contributing authors, 32 of them, including the foreword written by John Norman. Chief Norman was kind enough to write the foreword. Right behind that was Chief Joe Castro from the West Coast. So we have East and West. It was intentional that way that we designed the book to be supported and by our contributing authors from all over the country. So whether it's New York City, FDNY, Miami, Florida, Los Angeles City, the Pacific Northwest, Montana, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, you name it, they're in there, large and small, because we want this to be a resource to everybody. And thank you to all those contributors. Thank you for those who bought the book. It's sold out at FDIC. Thank you for that. And God bless you, those you serve, those you lead, and the fire service, and especially always keep your families first, because this job will suck the life out of you. And sometimes our families get the leftovers from us. So that's all I've got. Brian?
We'll see you next time. I appreciate you.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology. Only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnagrip.com.
IFSTA's Essentials of Firefighting 8th edition pairs trusted content with their latest research and includes a full suite of support products. Everything you've come to expect from IFSTA and more. It's essential content with unlimited customization potential. To learn more about this manual releasing in August of 2024, visit ifsta.org/essentials.